As any gamer watching this video can attest for, some games turn out terrible. This can be for a number of reasons: a rushed development, interference from a third party, or just good old-fashioned incompetence. However, some of the excuses companies make for damage control are flimsy at best, outright fraudulent at worst, but all incredibly naive that they think the public would fall for them. So, this episode, we take a look at these dir-brained deceptions, these calamitous cover-ups, and these Molyneux-esque mendacities. As I say, but hello you. I'm Guru Larry, and I welcome you to Fact Hunt. 4 game companies' hilariously pathetic excuses for failure. Here at Fact Hunt, we always like to bring you choices that aren't completely obvious. I mean, surely you don't need to be told for the billionth time that Super Mario 2 is actually a Japanese game called Doki Doki Panic. However, it's hard to resist an opportunity to talk about Superman 64, a game commonly regarded as one of the very worst ever made. In this video, especially. Because the excuses for this game's failure don't just come after the fact, they were literally printed in the game's manual. Really, Titus's licensed torturing of the Man of Steel could fit into several videos. You want development hell? Well, for a game that looks like it was knocked up in a matter of weeks, Superman 64 actually spent over 2 years in development, being previewed as early as the 1997 E3 show. It even garnered some positive notices over the years, being called a showstopper by GamePro, and GameFan called it one of the hottest looking games of 1998. Just a shame it didn't come out until the middle of 1999 then. Superman 64 was also heavily interfered by the license holders. According to lead developer Eric Kahn, the game was originally going to be similar to Tomb Raider, with all of Superman's powers intact. Magazines talk about the Red-Caped Wonder's range of attacks and, believe it or not, the variety of exteriors and interiors that featured in the game. But, right in the middle of development, people from Warner Brothers nixed virtually everything Titus wanted to include, saying that Superman would never do such things like punch people, or swim, or, well, presumably anything except fly through rings. Khan has said that, in the end, the final game only featured 10% of what the team at Titus set out to include, largely thanks to Warner's interference. And so, we come to the infamous excuse that was used for the game's shortcomings. When Superman 64 finally arrived, it was little more than a load of stages where Clark Kent flew through endless sets of rings, along with the odd half-baked and clearly incomplete interior level. The justification for the ring stages, right there in the game's manual, was that Lex Luthor had enveloped Metropolis in a kryptonite fog in order to destroy Superman. It was clear immediately that the kryptonite fog was just a smokescreen to cover up the game's utterly inept draw distance, and it was mocked from the beginning. Matt Casamasana, in a scathing review for IGN, had the following to say about the ridiculous kryptonite fog. Imagine if all developers explained their game's visual limitations in storyline. No, those are not jumpy frame rates you're seeing. Superman is merely drunk, which also blurs his vision considerably. Or maybe, you got it all wrong. That is not clipping. Superman is simply using his X-ray vision to look through the walls. While it would certainly make for some interesting story additions, it would most likely also rapidly ruin the gaming industry. The so-called kryptonite fog, of course, was only one reason why the game was so terrible. Looking at the final release, it's clearly an empty shell that's had so much ripped out of it and it's barely even a game anymore. It's rare to have a game where the unreleased beta and PS1 version actually contain far more content than the final product does. But Superman 64 is one of those rare examples of such a thing. As infamous as it is, the game truly manages to excel in every possible way when it comes to being a complete flying catastrophe. Unlike every other game featured in this video, age-old ZX Spectrum platformer Set Willy is still held up to this day as one of the finest games of its time, to the point where people still pay very public homage to it over 35 years after it came out. And yet you couldn't even complete the released version of the game. Were we more forgiving for such things back then? Perhaps. Indeed, it wasn't even that uncommon for games to release with game-breaking bugs that, if you were lucky, would end up being fixed in later releases or through pokes in the pages of magazines. This classic, however, is certainly the most famous example. How does it all happen? Well, as you take a trip through Minor Willy's mansion, taking in all the weird room names, picking up trash and try not to be killed endlessly by all the weird things that come out of Matthew Smith's mind, you'll come across a room called The Attic, complete with a rather impressive looking snake. However, the attic has a terrible secret. The moment you enter it, a bug triggers where the location of the game's lethal arrows is moved on various screens. After this point, if you then enter certain rooms, such as a catchily named "We must perform a quirker fleeg," Willy's face spawns in exactly the same place as an arrow, killing him instantly and repeatedly. And seeing this is a European platformer, you can't just not enter the room. You must collect every single item of crap here and in every other room in order to complete the game. The impossibility of actually completing the game and sending Minor Willy off to his bed was somewhat embarrassing for the game's publisher, Software Projects. Not least because they had set up a competition in which the first person to claim victory over the game and provide proof would win themselves a prize. And so, rather than admit the bug, they tried to fob it off. The studio's Alan Morton claimed to magazines that after entering the attic, some rooms were filled with a poisonous gas, saying that it was just a little something they put in to make the game more difficult. Seriously, what is it about game developers and using poison mist as a way to excuse their failings? It's the equivalent of telling your teacher that the family dog's currently shitting out your homework. However, the situation was resolved somewhat. A young duo named Ross Holman and Cameron Else came forward to say that they had legitimately completed the game. How did they manage it? Well, they recognised the bug and fixed it with a single line poke, which they helpfully provided to Software Projects. Said fix was promptly published everywhere and people could finally complete the game. Well, as long as they were skilled enough to do so, because micro-platformers are nearly impossible as it is. One of the duo even landed a job at Software Projects for its trouble. You may be wondering though, just what the game's creator, Matthew Smith, has to say about it. Well, not much at all apparently. The making of Set Willy was so stressful and so fueled by substances that he doesn't like to talk about it, even to this day under doctor's orders. So really, it's no wonder that a tiny little bug fixed by a single line of code was able to do so much damage to the game. Who remembers 2017's smash hit title, LawBreakers? Anyone? No, seriously. Anyone at all? Okay, it's clear that none of you do, and that's not much of a surprise, I suppose. Even at the game's peak, this online multiplayer shooter was played by, at most, a few thousand people. It came, it flopped, and the servers were shut off barely a year after the game's release. Officially, you can't even play the game anymore. The reasons for the failure of LawBreakers, on the surface of it, would seem kind of obvious. Despite not actually getting bad reviews and being the first game from a new studio headed up by Cliff Bleszinski, he of the Gears of War and what have you, The game was immediately trounced, not just by the highly successful Overwatch operating in the exact same genre, but the rise of the Battle Royale genre. If people into this sort of thing weren't playing Overwatch, they were probably playing PUBG, and then Fortnite, and then Warzone, or whatever it is people play there now. Hell, more people play that idiot Randy Pitchford's Overwatch rip-off, Battleborn, than ever played LawBreakers. There was just no space for the game out there. Simple enough, surely. It was in the wrong place at the wrong time. However, since the game's failure and his subsequent retirement from game development, Cliffy B's been sitting and pondering why the game failed. And in February 2020, he came up with an answer. It was too woke. Okay, perhaps he should be heard out. All the juicy detail came from an Instagram post featuring the following highlights. One big epiphany I had was that I pushed my own personal political beliefs in a world that was increasingly divided. Instead of the story being, this game looks neat, it became, this is a game with the woke bro trying to push his hacky politics on us with gender-neutral bathrooms. Instead of, who am I going to choose? It became, white dude shoehorns diversity in his game and then smells his own smug farts in interviews, instead of just letting the product speak for itself. It's okay to be political when your company or studio is established for great product first, but we were unproven, and I regret doing it. I mean, it's true that LawBreakers features a diverse range of characters, you know, just like noted megaflop turkey game Overwatch does. It's hard to see what gender-neutral bathrooms has to do with anything, and the art of huffing one's farts at being at fault is even less clear. But hey, whatever floats Cliffy's boat. The obvious reaction here, really, is to wonder just what the bloody hell Cliffy is going on about. But then this is a man who dubs himself Dude Huge, so I'm not sure if he knows either. You may expect there to be evidence of people on the internet getting angry at the game for being woke at the time, as there is for something like The Last of Us 2. But, well, there's not much really. In fact, there's not much evidence of anyone ever talking about LawBreakers at all, which I think might just have been the main problem all along somehow. People have speculated that this shocking revelation is possibly a way for Cliffy to generate hype for his upcoming memoirs and, well, good luck to him. Chances are more people will read that book than people who ever played LawBreakers, after all. Most of us of a certain age loved everything about the Tony Hawk games. From the lengthy grinds and endless manuals, to the big lines and sounds of Goldlinger's Superman. They were some of the best skateboarding games going. And we still love them now, thanks to that shiny new remaster going around. However, the series did go through a long and miserable dark age in the late 2000s and early 2010s. And no two games sum that up quite like Tony Hawk's Ride and Shred. Annoyingly, no one from Activision themselves, or even the game's star, has ever managed to figure out the obvious reason why these two awful titles did the gaming equivalent of falling off a rail and slamming your gonads directly up into your chest. Before Ride and Shred, Tony Hawk's games have been somewhat mediocre for years. New games like Project 8 and Proving Ground weren't up to the standards set by older games, and more serious efforts like EA's Skate series had taken a few lumps out of them. The answer for Activision was to make some wild changes. Original developers Neversoft get kicked out of the door and replaced by new kids, Robomodo, who have a cunning plan. Why don't we get people to actually skate when they're playing this skateboarding video game? That was the design philosophy behind the all-new Tony Hawk's Ride, released in 2009. How do we get people to actually skate when playing the game? Well, naturally, you include a plastic skateboard controller that you stand on while playing. And because of this, you up the price of the product to $120. Sounds good, right? It wasn't. The new way of playing Tony Hawk was filled with so many problems. it was deemed almost unplayable from the start. Even trying to do a simple kickflip was fraught with issues. It came in for a massive critical kicking, with Eurogamer's Ellie Gibson simply saying, "Don't buy Tony Hawk's Ride unless you want to be taken for one." And indeed, most people didn't buy it. The game was a huge commercial flop, not even entering the UK top 40 on release. And we bloody love Tony Hawk over here. The issue should have been clear. Fiddling around with this stupid and expensive plastic deck was not even remotely as fun as playing with a controller was in the old games. Simple as that. It was so bad that it made people pine for the days of American Wasteland, let alone Tony Hawk's 1 and 2. But Activision had a different idea. The reason why the game didn't perform was actually because the software wasn't up to scratch. Yeah, they spent so much time creating the peripheral that they couldn't get a decent game going for it. One has to ask why the skateboard was so cacked too if they spent all that time in it, but hey-ho. And so, Activision stuck with the plastic board for another instalment. 2011's Tony Hawk's Shred. And guess what? It was barely an improvement at all. It might have worked a little better if you really squinted at it, but the key problem still remained. The motion controls weren't any good, and it wasn't as fun as playing the old games. Seriously, if anyone had just sat down during development and tried to play this followed by Tony Hawk 3 back-to-back, the whole project would have been binned immediately. Shred sold a pathetic 3,000 copies in its first week in the US, and that appeared to be the end of the series completely. Unfortunately, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5 was still to come, and you can find details about that dumpster fire in my Dickish Developers episode of Fact Hunt. But even the man and legend himself, Tony Hawk, couldn't quite put his finger on why the game failed so hard. He thought the critics just hadn't given it a chance. And that's the real answer for Shred's failure, was because peripheral-led games like this and Guitar Hero were simply going out of style by the time it came out. Poor old Tony actually thought the board controller was ahead of its time. But I'm sure that many people who struggled endlessly trying to even bloody move in-game with the thing would agree with the man. Wouldn't they? Hello you. Thanks ever so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe to be first to see future Fact Hunt episodes. Click on the bell if you already are to make sure you're notified, and be sure to check out my other episodes. And if you want to be super awesome, check out my Patreon. But thanks again for watching, and I'll be seeing you next time. Ta-ra for now.